12 years.
This meeting is being recorded.
Ryan did this for 12 years, never attending college. When Catherine Ryan was almost 30 in 1985, she moved to Cambria, a tourist town between Los Angeles and San Francisco. She intended to stay here for a few months, living with her mother. As of 2000, she was still living with her mother, a situation that suited them both well and got Catherine through some rough times. In Cambria, she had many part-time jobs at a yogurt shop, an answering service, and as a pastry chef at a restaurant. In tourist off-season, Hyde had no job. Resigned to at least 2 months of unemployment, she realized that she had no excuse not to write. She wrote and joined the Cambria Writers' Workshop, a group of well-published authors. Ryan had 122 rejections for her short stories and had contacted 25 agents to publish her book, Walter's Purple Heart, without success. She attended the Santa Barbara's Writers' Conference and got good information to help her writing and to get her work published. By 1995, Hyde had several dozen short stories published, but her novels were still unpublished. In 1997, her first novel was published, Funerals for Horses, and in 1999, Pay It Forward was published and later turned into a movie. Jeannie will talk about Pay It Forward and the most recent publications of Ryan Hyde's book. She has more than 40 books published. Recently, Catherine has had 2 books released each year. When not writing, Catherine Ryan Hyde is an avid hiker, traveler, equestrian, pet lover, and an amateur photographer. She had a book of photos published, which is called 365 Days of Gratitude, Photos from a Beautiful World. She has also written young adult novels and a children's book. Catherine Ryan Hyde's books often make the point that if people would act of kindness and empathy, the world would be a better place.
Catherine Ryan Hyde's literary works are generally optimistic explorations of ordinary people, characters who are troubled or down on their luck, or recovering from past difficulties or abuse. Many feature journeys that parallel some of her own travels, life in New York City, small towns, and cross-country travels, and explore settings often in those areas and in the American West and Southwest. The novel we're discussing today centers on a theme of universal kindness, paying it forward, as exemplified by many of the characters in this novel. The genesis of the idea for the novel came when Hyde's car caught fire in what she described as a bad neighborhood in which she lived, and 2 total strangers came to her assistance, then left before she could even thank them. Since then, Pay It Forward has been translated into 20 languages for publication in more than 30 countries, and was chosen among the best books for young adults in 2001 by the American Library Association, and continues to be among her most popular and requested works. The movie Pay It Forward was released in 2000. And in one of the interviews, she mentioned that this really irritated her because then the movie became paramount, pun intended, and her novel took a back seat. And she is all about the written word, so this really irritated her. Pay It Forward, Young Readers Edition, was released on August 19th, 2014. The new version tells the same story, but was extensively revised to be more complementary to lesson plans, summer reading lists, etc., for students at middle school grade level. And she appeared in one of the interviews that actually took a film of her in a middle school entertaining questions from the children. And she talked again about the kindness theme. Hyde is a published young adult author in the United Kingdom, but in the United States, she's turned to Lake Union Publishing. Lake Union is Amazon Publishing's book club fiction imprint. It was created in 2014 and prints books digitally, in print format, and even offers some audio. This publisher does use developmental and copy editors and proofreaders to help the authors. Around 2007, the publishing and bookselling industry learned that readers care more about great writing than they care about the name of the publisher. By 2011, self-published authors began to identify as indie authors or independent authors and became cool kids. Self-publishing had a stigma before the digital age, but print-on-demand publishing and Amazon.com were game changers. Now there's no need to worry about economy of scale and printing thousands of copies of the books. There's no need for a sales force to get these books into bookstores. And I'm thinking a future discussion that we might have is about the role of indie authors versus authors published by well-known and well-respected publishers in the digital age.
Another thing that Catherine Hyde Ryan said was once she took the contract to work with that type of publishing, she got a regular paycheck, which is something that authors never did. And that did marvelous things for her financially, that she knew that she could count on having money. And it's like so many times when you hear that it took her so long to get the first book published, you know, even though her second book seemed to be a great seller, there's no guarantee that the money's going to keep coming. So the publishing through Amazon is great for some of the authors. We want to start with questions? Okay. We need to be up here, right? Okay. The first question is, in the beginning, Raymond uses his small resources and time to help feed and then rescue a cat. In doing so, what is revealed about his character? How does the cat help cement Raymond's and Mrs. G's relationship? Go ahead. Margie.
Oh, he's a sensitive, caring person, and it seems like he's for the underdog.
Meets Mrs. G, but there's one time where he's carrying the cat, and I think he brought it to Mrs. G and said, you know, here, this cat needs a home and this cat will keep you company. And she said, I can't keep the cat because I won't know where he is and I can't trip over him, I can't fall. So he says, well, we're going to we'll put a collar with a bell on him, and then when he moves, you'll be able to know where he is. And she became really, really attached to the cat, as did the cat to her. And also their Raymond and Mrs. G's relationship really blossomed. Should I just read the next question? Despite the ugliness and unfairness of what is going on in the story, many people will step up and show kindness. How do you feel about the responses Raymond receives during his search? Do you believe that difficult situations bring out the best or worst in humanity?
In his quest to find Lewis, he met many people. Some were rude and some were very kind. And I guess that's how humanity is. And if through the kindness of some of the people, he didn't give up. And he could have, but he did find some people that were very kind, and ultimately that helped him find Lewis. That's it.
I have a corollary question. What do you think makes people react so differently? What do you think in their background will allow them to care more about others than themselves? What do you think the factors are?
I think that some people rely on the experiences that they themselves have had. And if they've been treated with kindness, then they tend to be kind to other people. If they have not been or been abused, unfortunately, that's the only way they know how to behave. And so it perpetuates it. But I do believe that difficult situations bring out the best or the worst in people. Sometimes you're surprised by the fact that some people rise to the occasion, and sometimes you're disappointed in the fact that they don't. But I do believe that the situations that are difficult do bring out the best or worst in people.
Do you think that socioeconomics plays a large factor in this? Do you think that people that are necessarily poor would behave in a certain way versus people who are rich? What do you think about that?
I believe that you are who you are. I don't think that socioeconomic backgrounds really have a factor. I grew up in a relatively low-income, poor family, and my father was the most generous person you'd ever want to know. So it doesn't really matter, not just my experience in what I see in the world. But I think in this case, like the lawyer that slipped $100 twice in his back pocket, was it twice or 3 times? And he did it without fanfare, no recognition, anonymously. Same thing that we're taught in Judaism, that we're not supposed to have a plaque with our name on the wall. We're supposed to want to give regardless. So it's kind of like a Jewish connection. Oh, I should read them. Go ahead.
In terms of difficult situations bringing out the best or worst, I've personally witnessed difficult situations bringing out the best. I lived in New York and I was there during 9/11. I was also there during Hurricane Sandy. And especially during Hurricane Sandy, I had just retired and I volunteered in a site with many, many other volunteers coming from all different kinds of states, giving out food, giving out clothing. And you just saw how the best of everybody came out. It was really an amazing experience. I think I gained more from it than anything I've ever done before. And you just saw that everybody, no matter how poor people were they were traveling and they were just volunteering. It was amazing. It was a great experience.
Among the research for Christians who reached out, or not just reached out, but put their lives in danger sometimes for Jewish people during the Holocaust, there were books written. One of the books was called The Conspiracy of Goodness, or it might have been a newspaper article first, and then I think it became a book. I wish I could remember the rabbi's name. I can't remember. And it was all about how people, from the mailman to people like Oskar Schindler, Raoul Wallenberg, and I'm trying to think of the females who put their lives, the Polish woman who hid the notes in the jar and all that. There was a whole range, and they couldn't even find, the research showed there wasn't even one bit of commonality. They came from all different backgrounds, like I said, and all different socio backgrounds, like the mailman one to the whomever. So it was called A Conspiracy of Goodness, how they were able to rescue Jews and hide Jews. And I think that is symbolic of all of the goodness in the world.
Thank you.
You know, I think it is not just a Jewish concept. I think it's a concept around the world that out of everything bad comes something good. And if you remember back to 9/11, as horrific as it was, the goodness that came out is the outpouring of love and emotions and help. And I just finished reading a book during the Holocaust, the Danish people, how they took their lives, put their lives on the line and helped the Jews. So I think a lot of it has to do with your upbringing and what you're given. What is it, nature versus nurture? But what you're given as a child, what you put forth as you're growing, and the morals and the ethics that you have, the hope that you can develop, the family kindness that you are raised with, the love, the devotion, being non-judgmental. There's a lot of factors I believe, that go into what a person's actions are during a terrible situation. And it's not about, and unfortunately, the kids today have to learn that because they're such a me generation. And hopefully they'll eventually get it if the parents just keep pushing and pushing and pushing.
So bringing it back to the story, it seemed to me that he was so lacking in his opinion of himself, and the goodness of the other people helped him to find himself. And that to me was such a poignant part of the story, that the fact that these other people, which also kind of amazed me because I can't imagine inviting somebody into my house for breakfast, but the fact that they did helped him to find himself and continue on his journey.
I'm going to add to what Eileen said, that if you remember, he did not have friends. He did not have a family that was especially supportive of him. He said his mother didn't understand him. And at the end, the mother said, "I'm trying hard to see what you're doing." That Raymond, the first question about the cat, he'd been taking care of this cat that was in a basement abandoned because he didn't want it to starve. He knew he couldn't bring it home. And then when it came to the one point that, I don't remember if it had to be demolished or something was going on with the building, and he took the cat and really.
Mason was going to harm the cat.
Oh, harm the cat. Okay. So he rescued the cat. And, and then he did everything he could with the little resources and money to make sure he had it set up so that Mrs. G could take care of it. So you find his kindness to animals, his kindness to people. And I don't know anybody else, but I mean, here we have a teenage boy that's knocking on doors and making cold calls to people. So he really was invested in the situation, that he really wanted to do something good.
Anybody remember the cat's name was Louisa? I think it was Louise, wasn't it? It was Louisa. Was it? And you got Louise. Okay. Louisa. Yeah.
Okay. All right, should we go? Does anyone, oh, yes.
This may be a little off track, but I thought it was very sweet and very wonderful what Raymond did, but I worried about him. I mean, the kid doesn't have any friends, and he, goes out of his way to save the cat, which was great, and to help Mrs. G, which was great. But I almost found it too hard to believe. He was just such a wonderful kid. And I suppose there are kids like that and people like that, but I also worry about him in the future, and hopefully he would form friendships with people his own age.
Are we number 3?
Oh, sure.
If anybody on Zoom wants to speak, it should work. Just unmute and chime in.
Okay, how was prejudice a central theme of the trial?
I think that Ronan wanted to say something.
Okay.
You have to unmute yourself.
Okay.
You're not. You're okay.
I absolutely was thinking the same thing. I hear somebody else talking.
It's you.
Is that me in feedback? I absolutely was thinking the same thing through the book as Denise. I was really concerned because, yes, it was wonderful what he was doing, but it was still a little bit weird and dysfunctional that he didn't have any connections with kids his own age. And I'm like waiting for a sequel that he's okay. He has a friend who's not 95 years old. And also, I guess I'm a city kid at heart. He was going into different neighborhoods. He's a child knocking on doors. I loved the book. I couldn't put it down. But these elements, that was a little hard for me to believe that he didn't get beat up, or I don't know, something else didn't happen to him in the streets. That's my take.
Okay.
Well, he did have a friend in the neighborhood in the beginning. And Andre, and he moved. So that's what happened. And then he was kind of adrift. Also, he was a very tall kid. He wasn't broad, but he was very tall. So,
He was half black, half white.
and he was half black, half white, which I'm not sure how that made him look different, but he wasn't a broad kid. He was just tall. But I'm sure that when he was walking along, if he had confidence, and he seemed to have, or live in his little world, people didn't seem to bother him. So they didn't interrupt him. So, but he did have a friend in the beginning.
Behind you, Lynn.
And he was, I believe, 17 or 18 years old. He was not a small child. He was, as was said before, he was tall. And I also believe that 16, was it? Okay. And I also believe that he would have, because of his nature, even if he had gotten, the few people that he contacted initially, he got some good responses and some negative responses, but he was so determined to find this person that I think even if he had gotten all negative responses in the beginning, he would have kept on going. He was really determined. And that's, of course, always a good quality.
I think there are lots of children, teenagers, maybe even adults who fly under the radar and they don't have a lot of friends. And many of them grow up and they're just fine, and they find their level of friendships as they get older, because teens especially are known to be very cliquish. If he didn't fit into those cliques, in a few years, he'd have his own community. And I also think that we need to remember that somebody had mentioned nature versus nurture. People are not born with a clean slate. So somebody's life experiences living in a family that was very loving might still grow up and be a not very nice person. And someone growing up like he did, where he didn't fit in either of his families, had a wonderful outlook on life and really wanted to help people. So that's it. Just got to remember that.
Have we moved on to the prejudice as a central theme? Not really? Sure.
Okay. The author in an interview said she presents things in her book and leaves it for her readers to draw conclusions. And I think that that's one of the things she did with Raymond knocking on the door. If you do recall, there was one point where he said he was afraid. He had knocked on the door, nobody was there, he knocked again, and a large man with tattoos came out and was kind of gruff in the way that he spoke to him. And that kind of threw him for a loop. So that goes with the interview that, you know, the author did that says she's presenting things for her readers to look at and draw their own conclusions. And if you think of that, she's presenting, and this goes with the whole prejudice, her description of the characters sometimes tell you that, you know, this big burly tattooed guy, she was making it so that there was a stereotype of someone you might be afraid of. And later, as you're getting into the trial, I'm thinking of the fear that the woman who shot him had. So keep that in the back of your mind. I think the author, from what I read about the author in interviews, she knows that not everybody's going to agree, and she wants you to question what she writes. And she's using sometimes stereotypes to present it. So let's go back to how is prejudice a central theme of the trial? And I'll bring it back to you. Let you start, and then we'll go down here.
I do want to comment on that, and I'll tie that into what I was going to say preceding. I took out my cell phone just for 2 minutes to look up. It was really bothering me. The rabbi who wrote about the conspiracy of goodness was Rabbi Harold Schulweis, and his name should be remembered. And he wrote all about good people during the Holocaust. And anyway, so when you think about, when we think about Anne Frank, there was the conspiracy of evil, of course, and then the conspiracy of goodness, and the combination, the people that hit her, the non-Jews, the staff, who worked with her father and so on, those were, part of the conspiracy of goodness. And then, of course, those who betrayed the Franks were the evil. Okay, well, I'm going to tie it back in. And I think to answer the question about the theme of the trial, it was similar, them versus us. And the whole point that I thought was so well brought out in the book, how during the trial, no matter how excellent, and I personally, I'm sure the rest of you thought that the lawyer, the attorney did an excellent job trying to show, the callousness of the woman who shot him, and how she seemed to have no real remorse, and how the jury also perceived, the victim as them, and she was one of us. I'm just kind of paraphrasing. It was explained so beautifully and clearly in the book, and I think that goes with so much in our country, not to get off track, but dark-skinned people of whatever background often are perceived as them, not us, and on and on. And I think that was very clearly brought out very well in the book.
If you remember, there was part in the trial where the prosecutor said that, what if it was that fellow who's in the second seat, who's sitting there by himself now, instead of with the Isabel and Mrs. G? What if he was the one that almost tapped on your shoulder? He was trying to bring out, I think, without spelling it out, he was trying to bring out, you probably heard a Hispanic voice. She did hear it. And I think that was the issue. He was trying to say, this is all about how we perceive others. And it's the same reason why the trial or the jury acquitted, because they couldn't relate. They could relate to fear of the other, but they couldn't relate to the pain of that family.
She put 5 bullets into him. That would have done it for me. She didn't stop with 1 bullet. She put 5. That was a whole lot of hate. Anybody else?
To be brutally honest, if I'm walking down a street and here I am, I'm a white woman, now I'm even getting older, I can't run as fast, and somebody's walking behind me, I'm going to be a little bit nervous. And I happen to not have a gun, but if I did, I might even put my hand on the revolver just in case. The problem was she didn't give the guy a chance, no chance at all. And okay, let's even give her the benefit of the doubt. She put her finger on the trigger and 6 bullets came out. Okay, fine. But if that had happened, I would have felt bad after the fact, and she did not. That's where her prejudice came in. It's not just being fearful, but not even caring afterwards. Anybody want to add? Right. You're right.
Not necessarily defending her, but if you think about the aspect that she's a woman, I guess mid-50s-ish, she's deaf, she's turned off her hearing aid, she's walking at twilight, and she's probably easily startled because she doesn't have all of the sensory input that we all have. So that all played into it, although the number of bullets does definitely weigh against her.
The other thing was, somebody made the point, her son, that she's never wrong. She just couldn't admit guilt in any area of her life. So that was also part of it.
If you contrast the difference between what we talked about people doing good things under harsh circumstances, to me, the verdict came out just so contrary to what we all think that people will do in bad times, especially the way they portrayed that woman. I mean, she was relentless, she was nasty, showed no remorse, and yet the jury still bought her story. I understand fear. I myself years ago was attacked by, unfortunately, a Black boy who ran up to me and tried to steal a necklace off my neck. My reaction would not be to turn around and shoot him, but to either fight or run away. And so I take the fact that even though her hearing aids were off, she heard him somehow, or she sensed him. So I didn't understand really how the verdict came through on that. Again, if we're trying to think that most people will do good things, in this case, I think the jury didn't do a good thing and probably didn't read her book. But okay.
Said her hearing aids were all
True.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
There are people who think that if you say, I'm sorry, it means that you're admitting guilt. But there are lots of things in life that can happen accidentally. And you just say, I'm sorry. It doesn't mean you did anything on purpose. It just means you're sorry that it happened. You're sorry. You're walking down the street with a friend and you step on their toe. It was an accident. You should say you're sorry. It doesn't mean you did it on purpose. It means you're sorry that it happened. She could have at least done that. But as her kids said, she was never one to admit anything, that she couldn't possibly do anything wrong, even by accident. And that I find unforgivable.
In contrast, that was the problem that Raymond had. He always said he was sorry. Did you get that?
No, I was just going to say exactly the same thing, that he kept saying, don't say sorry.
If you remember, they even told you that the makeup of the jury was mainly white. There had been 2 Hispanic people or 3 Hispanic people, and they were excluded from the jury. And the way that it was sold was, this is a church-going, bridge-playing, older woman. Think of her being in jail. What purpose is it going to serve, putting her in jail for 6 months? And the jury bought that argument. It was hard to see, but this is one of the things where the author said she wanted everyone to draw their own conclusion of what was going on. A major theme of this is prejudice. And she tried to show you that this was a case that they felt was prejudice. And then when you go back to the end, where he wrote the article, his essays for the 2 teachers, 1 C- and 1 A+. So it's how you're looking at a situation. Everybody looks at it differently. Margie, you want to say something?
I'll say it
At the end. Okay, Margie. Okay. From the time Louise is killed through the trial and the verdicts, did you ever feel empathy for the woman, Mrs. Hatfield, who shot him? If so, why? Either way, did you feel the verdict was fair? Okay, we'll give I'll take it.
Oh, God. The way this book was written just bothered me tremendously, but I had no empathy for her. I mean, she had this all-white jury, which, how do you have this in Manhattan, is mind-boggling to me. I don't think it could be. And they acquitted her. I wouldn't acquit her. No, put her in jail, no, but have community service. Go talk to people. Do something. You did something wrong, now make it right. And that wasn't discussed. This book bothered me up the wazoo. What can I say? Ugh. Yeah.
Yeah, tell us.
So anyone who knows Margie knows that if it's written by a woman, it's generally wonderful. So I'm like shocked. But I think the point was what was said by Lori, that she left that open, and those are the kind of books like I love, that I can come to my own conclusions about how I feel. But I agree that she should have got something. I mean, but there's nothing that's, if you read the newspapers, that's so terrific about our legal system at the moment, because every day there's someone who was convicted who didn't do it, and they're always Black. So obviously we need work to do, and I think that was her point. The thing with prejudice is from the very beginning, in that he's half Black and half white, and truly feels he fits in nowhere, and no one gives him help in finding his way, either family, which to me was horrendous. Anyway, anybody else want to answer the prejudice question?
I had a little bit of empathy for her, maybe because of my own personal background. My mother was almost deaf her whole life. She had childhood illness that was never taken care of, and she lost hearing in one ear. And so she wore a hearing aid all the time we were growing up. And then she had surgery in the late 60s that restored partial hearing to her. So, the fact that she was deaf kind of struck a chord with me. But then again, what was she doing walking? Was it after dark or at twilight without her hearing aids on? So that gave me a little bit of empathy, but not enough. Anybody else?
Alan? We can't hear Alan.
Yeah, okay. I was having trouble with unmuting. When you read the book Cast, which we really should be reading, it talks about people and their tribe. And people will ignore everything except they will vote for their tribe. And over again. That's why a jury of only one race, it encourages that tribalism. And the jury defended their tribe when they acquitted that woman.
I don't know. Also, a social studies teacher should be thinking more broadly, and even versus an English teacher. And when he brought his report to the social studies teacher, she shut it down. She said, this is how it runs, and there's no wiggle room and no explanation as to how it really worked.
In relation to that, there was an interesting concept in there about objective reality versus subjective reality. And then they even got into quantum mechanics. So if you think about the way that we all view things and depending on where we are in a particular instance, how we view the situation, I think that's what they're talking about. And the fact that that teacher, I think Mrs. Evans, thought that there was such a thing as objective reality. And that whole discussion I thought was very interesting. She was the one that gave him a C-. Because she just really felt that, do you want to answer that better than I will? You have better answers than I do.
I think that one of the things that she said was, it was the attitude of a teenager. She didn't really take the whole tribalism thing as being serious, where then they showed you that the English teacher said that he thought that was a very mature attitude. And Raymond, who felt that he had a better relationship with the English teacher, said, well, that was really something, I don't know if he said the lawyer, but it was an opinion of someone else he had told him.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing was that the teacher thought that it was the attitude of, someone that was very, very mature. And, guess what? It was a lawyer's opinion, not his.
I thought the main thing was that the teacher that gave him the C- was an older unmarried woman who was stuck in her ways. And the male teacher that gave the A+ was a young guy just out of college. It made a big difference. Oh, yes, that's true. The teacher that gave the A+ was also Jewish. The young guy had a Jewish last name. Yeah.
The next question.
Which is the next question?
The next question is.
Oh, 6?
Here it is. Oh, no, wait.
Number 6. Okay, how did Sunday dinner, Luis Velez and Luis Xavier Velez Esquire, the lawyer, help Raymond and Isabel both emotionally and financially? Well, the lawyer was the one who put $100 in his back pocket right away for saying, you're doing volunteer work and that's really very nice. And toward the end gave him, put $100 in again. And I think that was after he realized that the real Luis Velez had been murdered. So that helped financially because he did use that for Mrs. G mostly. And what was the Sunday dinner? That was where they invited him in. Oh, I thought it was someone else in the family who invited you to Sunday dinner. We didn't realize you were just a random stranger passing by. But his story really captured them. And they were the ones who suggested the block party that raised $700, which sounds like a lot, but doesn't go very far. But it gave hope.
Also, when he was invited to dinner at Luis Velez's house, he got to see how a family that really loved one another behaved around each other and realized how much he was lacking in his life. And he was very happy to go back again. They invited him and Mrs. G to come back, and she was very reluctant because it was in her really down period. But she also was enamored of the fact that these people were truly loving and cared about one another.
And he also met one of his first new friends, the daughter of the family, was attracted to him and was impressed with his behavior. And she really tried to be friendly and warm and inviting. And she did. I think they took a short walk together after dinner. And when they got ice cream, they brought it back, I think, for everybody else. But they took a short walk together. So it seemed like he did, through all of this, make a friend. And I thought that his relationship might continue. Other people are shaking their heads and thought that it was a one-timer, I think. But you never know. Okay, anybody else?
I think the other thing is they wanted you to realize that the name Luis Velez was like John Smith, that there were so many to be found and how they all were different. And then the lawyer, they let you know, he said that he knew about the incident because people had asked him about it. And then again, when it came to the end, he knew that what had happened at the trial. And as soon as this young man came to his fancy offices with no appointment and he saw him, he said, I remember you, and took the time to talk to him and help him, and then saw Isabel on a Sunday afternoon. So you're left at the end with the thought, knowing that maybe something good will happen to help Isabel and the family, and that there's humanity in the world. This busy lawyer was taking it not for free, it's going to be on contingency, but still he's offering his services. And it seemed like from, the picture that they painted him, it was good services that were being offered. Anybody else have something to say on this one, or should we move along? You want to say something?
Just more detail. The lawyer did say he's 95% sure that she will win the civil suit against the shooter, so that Isabella's children will have a college education. So that was what left it in the high point.
Should I read the next question?
Sure, go ahead.
When Mrs. G, the most fun, Raymond take her to hear a cellist play. Mrs. G's comment on how the cellist says the instrument has the same sad to beautiful ratio as life. What do you think is meant by that? How does this statement relate to the book? I'm just about ready to add with it.
I do better reading than I do thinking. So many of life's tragedies bring us together in sadness, which is a beautiful thing. Shared grief is one way to exhibit our deep emotional connection to each other. Also, music allows us to display our emotions openly because we're experiencing the music together and feel comforted and emboldened and strengthened by the presence of others.
There's a reason why for Kol Nidre here at Shirami, we have Jason Calloway with his cello. because the range of that instrument is deep and solemn, and it can be completely joyful too. So it's the significance of that particular instrument. But of course, music in general can help us open up, feel, be allowed to feel, given permission to feel or to express our emotion.
I think that music is so important in all of our lives. I will bet that everyone sitting here who is around my age can sing every song from the 50s and 60s. And I know that when my mother's Alzheimer's was really bad, if I took her to services, she could sing the prayers. And anytime there was a musical program that I took her to, she would wake up. Music is a marvelous, marvelous thing. And as far as the sad to happy ratio, I think that the sad parts of our life help us, as unfortunate as they are, to appreciate everything good that comes to us. You know, you all know this has been like a horrendous last couple of years for me, but there is still so much joy in the world and so many things one can be thankful for. And those are the things one needs to focus on. And I think the fact that things happen that are not so marvelous, in a way, helps us to do that. And I think that the cello music, as beautiful and as heartrending as it is, helped Mrs. G to do that, helped Raymond to do that. It really captured them in a way that maybe other things would not. Anybody else?
My mother, she didn't have Alzheimer's, but she had dementia, which was caused from a series of mini strokes. She loved Judaism, and her one concern, she used to ask the rabbi, am I a good enough Jew? And he said, if you ask that question, you are. But in any case, when she had dementia, before she had the dementia, but while she was living where she was living, she would always go to the services, Shabbat services. But after she got dementia, she responded so much to music that she was taken to the Baptist services as well. And she loved them. She absolutely loved the joy. So it transcended for her. And she always taught me, she had a lot of tragedies in her life. Her father was murdered, her et cetera, et cetera. We all have things in our background, but her glass was always half full. And I think that's, you know, she mourned deeply, we were appropriately, and in her heart, but her glass was always half full, and she was always happy for other people's happiness. And I thought that was, she was a mensch, whatever the female mensch is. Yeah.
Over you.
I just read that the author played the cello too, so she had some familiarity with that. That's it.
I think the point is made that Mrs. G has survivor's guilt. And I don't think she quite comes to terms with it. I don't think you ever do, but that was part of her makeup too. You know, her background with her family that was left behind and didn't make it.
Can I say something?
Sure. Then Margie.
Oh,
Go ahead.
this is not one of the questions, and I'll make it very brief. The author of this book, I think, said the most poignant thing in the entire book. She said, life is beautiful if you have someone to hold on to. And that struck me more than anything because it was so true. If you have no one to hold on to in life, life is not so beautiful. And that's why we're all here today. We all have each other, and that's beautiful. That's all.
Denise, didn't Mrs. G say at the end that, you know, she's a Holocaust survivor and she wanted to live to 100 and she had made peace that she was one of the few that survived. Yeah, no, and there was good and bad in this world, and she had lost her vision, but there was so much good and kindness. She just remembers that part, and she's trying to survive and make it to 100. So I think she had resolved that she was a survivor and the rest of her family was not.
Good point.
Okay. Where are we now? 8. Before we met Mrs. G, Raymond felt like he didn't fit in and was directionless. What ways does his relationship with Mrs. G not only change his current life, but shape his future as well?
Someone needed him.
Well, I think the important thing is Mrs. G accepted him as he was. And with her accepting him, it just gave Raymond a sense of purpose and, just increased his self-confidence and, how he felt about himself as a person. And he just looked at the world very, very differently. The other thing, his relationship with his father, I think, was really interesting because he kind of, would try to seek out his father, for advice. And I think his father was very, meant well, but, that pressure that he had from his second wife, was very, very difficult for him. So you kind of thought in the back of your mind that he really didn't respect his father too much because, he just kind of, put Raymond way, way down, like on the pedestal, and his wife was, who, I thought was horrible the way she treated Raymond, was just, very, very bad. But I think the relationship with Mrs. G just changed so much because of the way that, she just accepted, Raymond. Anyone else? Okay.
I thought that Raymond's relationship with Mrs. G was enhanced because she did give him advice and did identify him. And remember the beginning part, and they reiterated at the end, she saw him. She saw who he was and accepted who he was. Yes, I agree with you that way. But I think she pointed out things that he couldn't get from his parents. Okay, the mother was quick to judge all the time, right? And she was like worried about finances and stuff like that. And the father was closed a lot like Raymond was. He wasn't really open about his emotions or expressed himself well. The way he expressed himself with his son was, let's go for an ice cream soda like we used to. Trying to get what it was like to communicate with a younger child. It's a different thing than as they grow up and they're looking for guidance.
I was going to address that when Raymond knocked on her door, it was kind of an entry into an actual family for himself. But when I was thinking about saying that just now, it just made me think of the phrase opening doors. And through Isabel, so many doors were opened to him. Not all of them were wonderful, but so many were wonderful. And it opened a door to a whole new time of his life and probably opened a door to a different personality for himself where he wasn't always so sorry, but would continue to do good things in life. And his relationship with her just added a beautiful dimension.
This isn't with the question, but I thought it interesting that the first few Luis Velez's that he met, after they heard the story, they apologized to him for saying, it's wonderful that you're doing so much volunteer work and doing so much more. I wish I could, but, and of course they would be, there's different phases in everyone's life. And if you're working and have a family and other responsibilities, something's got to give. So, but I just thought it was interesting that so many apologize for not doing volunteer work as well.
I don't know your name. My sister Hadassah, a member in the yellow. Sorry? Harriet. When Harriet made the comment about how Raymond said, "I'm sorry," so many times, it just dawned on me something that was so obvious that I hadn't really thought about. How, well, and that's part of the answer to the question, how knowing Mrs. G, he gradually learned not to say, "I'm sorry." He was saying it constantly, and she was constantly telling me nothing to be sorry about. In contrast, the antithesis with the woman, on trial for the shooting, how she was never sorry. And the antithesis of that theme running through the book, it was so clear, but it didn't dawn on me that much till you said how often he said, "I'm sorry."
It just occurred to me while we were talking about the relationship with Mrs. G and with Raymond, that the author had to have some reason, and this really is an additional question rather than an answer, but the author had to have a reason for making Mrs. G blind. And I don't necessarily have the answer to that. I think I do, but but it's a question. So if anyone would like to answer it.
Good question. I think it was to enhance her neediness. Not only was she elderly, but she was truly helpless. She couldn't go out and go to the bank and buy her food. So I think that was it.
I'll give this. Yeah. I also think that maybe it was in contrast to the woman that shot the Louise, because she wasn't able to see the character. She wasn't able to see she wasn't able to see Raymond, and therefore wasn't able to make any kind of judgments based on her sight, where the other woman, the woman that shot Louise, the judgments were made on visual information. So.
And I was going to say along the same lines, there was again, similarities, and yet the antithesis, the one woman was deaf, and so she had a handicap, but she wasn't responsible. She didn't wear her hearing aids. And Mrs. G was blind, but somehow she saw things so clearly. She was so responsible and she saw things clearly. So they both had a handicap, but their personalities and their, lives, their actions were so different.
It's funny that you would say that she saw certain things, and I was going to say almost the corollary, which is she was blind to differences, whereas the deaf woman was so attuned to differences, and anything that was different from herself was no good. But with Mrs. G, she didn't care because she didn't see it and she didn't care. You were who you were, and that's what she liked.
So I read the book quite a while ago, and I hope I'm remembering this part of it. While I was reading it, I didn't quite understand if it was necessary to the story, but didn't Raymond tell Mrs. G about his sexuality, that he didn't feel attracted to either boys or girls, that for him, this was kind of like, he's young, he's 16. And it goes along with not fitting in. And Mrs. G made him feel comfortable about it. And maybe her blindness, like someone just mentioned, she was blind. So it meant that she didn't see the differences, that she accepted all of these different things about people. And, it didn't influence her judgment on people. She just accepted people for what they were.
On that same theme, when Raymond says that he doesn't feel one way or the other about boys or girls, and isn't there something wrong with him? And Mrs. G is very accepting of where he is, as well as the other people in his life. Isabel, all of these people that have come into his life as a result of his relationship with Mrs. G has made it more acceptable for him to feel the way he feels. Luis Velez, whose daughter wants to become friends, and Raymond says to her, "I'm not interested in you that way." And then she says, "Well, then we can just be friends." So he gets a whole new dimension to how he feels about his own emotions through the relationships that he develops with Mrs. G and through the others.
There's one more thing.
I just wanted to get back to the idea of Mrs. G's being blind. And when I was reading the book, I thought her enhanced sensory capabilities didn't seem accurate because I live with my mom who was 100, and as I was seeing her age, she would lose all these hearing and smell and touch and taste. But then I looked it up and the brain rewires itself to enhance other senses with blind people. This is heightened sense of hearing, smell, touch, as well as cognitive functions, such as memory and language, according to a new study by Massachusetts eye and ear researchers. I just thought that was interesting how she played that up in the book. Thank you.
I think we also have to think about, somebody had said all the relationships that Raymond had because of Mrs. G. And I think that we need to mention the fact that when the baby was born and Isabel had her dream that she shouldn't name the baby Luis after her husband, which was their intention. And that was like almost saying to Raymond, you know, you're someone special and we want your specialness to live on. And then Raymond said, well, all your children have Hispanic names. Is there a name, you know, your son shouldn't be different than your daughters. And they came up with naming the child Ramon. I think that just that little scene told so much about feelings of acceptance and honoring others for their kindness and what they do.
And also he wanted him to have a Spanish name because he wanted him to feel a very part of a family. And that's one thing he did not feel.
Real quick comment. My father-in-law, bless his soul, he's in heaven now. But when he lived in near Miami, they call it Aventura, it's North Miami. The neighborhood changed, his building changed, and it became more Hispanic. More people from Argentina and other places had come and moved into it. It used to be all Jewish. And it was hard for them to get, you know, for the high holy days to get a thing together. Anyhow, one of the guys that he played cards with twice a week was Hispanic, and my father-in-law got close with him. And he called him Ramon. His name was Raymond. And it made me think of him when I read that. And it meant you're my brother. You're part of us. So it was an inclusive thing. And it meant a lot to both of them, really.
I don't know whether I'm reaching a bit with this metaphor, but it struck me that every time Raymond took Mrs. G out, even though she could see, see life clearly, she still was needy and dependent physically. And he had to kind of prop her up, hold her up. And in a way, she helped him stand up straighter. She helped him have confidence. And I think that's kind of symbolic for all of us in life, that we all, no matter how strong and capable we all can help other people, and we all have needs that we can benefit from other people. Oops. In one of Mrs. G's conversations, she says that, quote, life gives us nothing outright, it only lends. Nothing is ours to keep. What is she referring to? Do you agree or disagree? If that is true, how does that shape the way you look at your life?
Thank you. I interpret that to be, for me, to live each day to the fullest and do the best you can in that day, because we're not here forever. And our loved ones also, to be kind to our loved ones and tell them that we love them and tell our friends how we feel about them, because they're only lent to us, our parents, our family, our friends. It's not given to us forever. And to do the best we can in life, because we're not here forever. And that's how I choose to live my life.
When I think about that, life gives us nothing outright, it only lends. First thing I thought of was health. One's health and one's loved ones, and to just have gratitude for what you have. And there's a prayer to treasure each day, teaching us to treasure each day.
My first thought was about physical things, and anything physical can be taken away from us. And then even the people who are in our lives can be taken away from us, except in our minds. And even then they can be taken away. But one thing that you can get from life that maybe you can hold on to longer are life's lessons, the lessons that you learn from loving or from being unloved, from fitting in and not fitting in, etc. That's something you can keep.
I think also because we are here temporarily, we do have a great responsibility to leave this world better than what we found it. And I think that's one of the things that we really need to be thinking about going forward.
Okay. Want to see you read it? Yeah. We kind of want to end this up. Do we want to rate the book? Okay, we hope that you really enjoyed it. There was a lot in here. I think the discussion's been really, really great. And I hope it will give you more things to think about as you reflect on what you read.
I would love to see that book being required reading in high school. I think it's a great thing for kids to discuss.
Do you know what? I think it is the kind of book and the way that they're marketing on Amazon, that this could be one that's picked up. It seems that more and more books, as you're researching for book clubs and stuff, you'll see that a lot of the books are being used in middle schools and high schools for discussion, where they give lesson plans and like have the whole thing day by day made out for teachers. So I think this might have been a little bit slow in starting this book, but by word of mouth, I think that it has spread.
I remember the Pay It Forward, they did have a young adults edition, and I think this probably fits in a young adult rather than a high school curriculum. But regardless, I do think it would be very good to have that introduced.
And one of the things about young adult novels, it seems that a lot of books that have main characters that are teenagers get classified as YA, young adult. And it doesn't mean that it's not for adults to read too. Okay. You want to start it with Vivian?
Okay, rating it.
5.
And I'll go to 10. I like her books. I like reading about people. I like reading about people in difficult situations, and she hit all those notes.
I would give it a 10. I've read most of her books. There's a new one, Seven Perfect Strangers, about dogs that are abandoned and a young lady finds them. So I like all her books.
I'd give it a 9. Gave me a good cry.
I think it's a 10 all the way.
I agree, 10.
I give it a 9+. My only reservation was I wish she had gone a little more into the Holocaust part, because I thought it seemed almost tagged on. And if I hadn't read that she was a survivor in the blog or in the back of the book, I would have been kind of taken aback. I don't know. I just wish there was a little more, but I give it a very strong 9+.
I love this book. I read it when it first came out. So, and I recommended it to numerous people, and I was told that they appreciated it. I loved it. I love to see how the characters evolved and grew and learned from each other. I just think it's beautiful when we can touch each other's lives that way.
I don't know what to give it. I really enjoyed it while I was reading it, but in the back of my mind, I'm saying this doesn't feel real. And then when I saw in the list of books in the front that she had written Pay It Forward, I hadn't read that book, but I saw the movie. So I said, oh, this explains it. But I did really enjoy it, and it has a great message and all that. So.
I really enjoyed it, and I gave it a 10. Which table gets next?
I enjoyed the book, but I'm giving it an 8. I felt that some of her metaphors were a little far reaching, and the Bob just as said, it was just didn't ring true. But I agree, I did get a good cry, and there was a lot to talk about, and I thought it great discussion, but I had to give it an 8.
I would give it a 9, only because some of it seems so unrealistic at times. But on the whole, I thought it was a great book. Just certain parts didn't ring true.
I enjoyed reading this book, whether some of the parts didn't ring true or not. I really enjoyed it. I give it a 10.
Well, I give it a 7. As I said, I thought Raymond was a little too good to be true, although I wish there were many more like Raymond. And I love that it promoted the relationship between Raymond and Mrs. G and all the good that came out of it. One of the best parts I thought was meeting the different Luis Velez's. I thought that was really interesting. But all in all, it was just a little too pat for me.
I gave it a 6 or a 7. What bothered me the most as a retired school social worker, there are a lot of middle school kids. If they read, they are the ones that are bullied. They're the loners. They are the ones that have the problems. They're going to read this book. And I don't know if they're going to be able to really figure out what's true, what isn't true. It bothered me. I mean, if you live in Podunk, USA, and they don't know about Manhattan, it did not ring true the way she brought this out. A whole white jury, this lady who turns off her hearing aids, these people being kind to Luis Velez, it just doesn't ring true to me. And I don't want kids to think the world incorrectly those who just don't have any supports. I really did not like the message of this book for young kids.
So I disagree. But Margie and I disagree about everything as much as we love each other. I gave it a 10, and I taught for many years and have grandchildren this age. Realism or not, to me, had less to do with the message. And I thought that the message was fantastic. I love the way it was written. I had read a book right before I read this that was written so poorly. And I started reading this, and I was immediately taken with how well it was written. And again, I thought there were so many really important messages in there. I don't think there is a kid alive who's going to read this and think that the world is all roses. This book wasn't all roses. So that's my take. And while I have this mic, do any of you want to rate it? Arlene?
Yeah, I loved this book. I think I would give it a 9. I hear what the rest of you are saying about it, but I tend to think that the overall theme of this book was kindness. And that's something that the world really needs, especially right now. And I love the book.
Sheila?
Sure, I would give it a 9. Even though I thought some of the book, especially at the beginning, was so Pollyanna-ish, like we say, it didn't really ring true for a young boy to do what he was doing with Mrs. G. But I love the little nuggets of wisdom that Mrs. G imparted to Raymond. And I thought it was well written, and I did recommend it to a number of people, and they liked it as well. So I was happy to read it.
Rona, do you want to rate it?
Yeah, I think I'd give it an 8. I couldn't put it down. It was a great story, and it kept me engaged in the same way that I watched Little House on the Prairie. And over and over, it makes me feel good. I know it's not real. Sometimes it's cloyingly sweet, but I enjoyed the book. I'd give it an 8.
Thank you.
I loved the book. I listened to it throughout. It was just an audiobook for me. And some of them aren't as enjoyable as audiobooks, but this was fabulous. So that's a 10 for that, for the enjoyability. And then maybe a 9 for, I wish that, like you said, I wish there was more about Mrs. G's background as a Holocaust survivor. It did seem like a little bit of an add-on. And also, I think Raymond's emotional intelligence just skyrocketed to, I won't say it was unbelievable, but Mrs. G really took an individual child and really elevated him almost to an unbelievable point. I wish there'd be more people like that in the world. And I regretted that he didn't use this brilliance of emotional intelligence on his own family, his mother, and to ameliorate that situation. But so I guess all in all, I'm at a 9.56. Bring it to there. I feel like I'm at the Olympics, you know.
I enjoyed the story. But I felt I was being manipulated because of all of the overly sweet and wonderful people that he met. So overall, I'd give it a 7.
I think I would give it an 8 because of some of the reservations that some of you have expressed, but we needed this message right now so badly. And I thank Lori for bringing it to us.
Well, I recommended it because I thought it was an uplifting book to read during this time, and so many books we read are downers. And I enjoyed researching about the author, and some of the quotes from the book I thought were just absolutely marvelous. I'm just going to read one at the end that she said about despair. We fall into despair when the terrible gangs up on us, and we forget the world can also be wonderful. We just see terrible everywhere we look. So what you do for your friend is you bring up the wonderful. So both are side by side. The world is terrible and wonderful at the same time. One doesn't negate the other, but the wonderful keeps us in the game. It keeps us moving forward. And I'm sorry to have to tell you this, Raymond, but that's as good as the world is going to get. And I think that kind of sums it up, that there's good and bad in the world. I'm willing to read a book, and I agree with all the things Margie said and everything else, but I say that was the author's prerogative. Yeah, she was right. She was telling us a story, and sometimes an author has to do that to get the point across. So it seems like nobody hated it. We got no zeros. So I think that it was a good experience for us to read. And I do hope that you recommend it to others, because originally it was recommended to me, and then somebody else said, oh no, it's a YA book, there's nothing in it. And then I saw someone who's a friend that's a really good reader, and she goes, oh no, we did this in our book club, you have to read it. And I read it and I recommended it to you. And the second time reading it, I saw more in it than I did the first. So I hope you enjoyed it.
I have a lot of thank yous. Thank you so much to Mark, because obviously the only way we pulled this off. Thank you to Denise for having the good sense to marry Mark. and Laurie and Jeannie, fantastic. I need you to be honest with me. So I need you to tell me how you feel this went, what you would like to do moving forward. So anyone who wants to raise up their hand and give me some feedback.
I like this. Somehow I functioned. I like this. Somehow I'm somebody that butts in. So even if I can just raise my hand to be able to get the mic. So I really like getting all together and seeing everybody. But I'll be honest, if it was only on a Zoom, I would still do it. So, but I enjoyed this very much.
Let's ask the people on this is my issue. Okay, yeah, I realize that. I know that it's everyone's prerogative whether to come or not, but it is a little bit cumbersome doing it on Zoom. So if the people on Zoom can watch it and not participate, would that make it a little bit easier for those of us who are here? They could, they can see the discussion, but when it comes to participating in the discussion, it's really hard.
I would prefer. I have to admit, even though I'm not a great Zoom person, I would prefer to have a situation where the people doing it by Zoom could still contribute. So.
I guess I don't agree with that. I think it's best for the people here to participate and then to just record our session and let the people that are on Zoom see it at their leisure.
I agree. Another problem I have is people speaking with the mask on. It's very hard to understand some people more than others. So if you want to participate, maybe we can take off the mask, say what we need to say, and then put it back on. And also the Zoom is cumbersome.
I would just like to point out that there are, for those on Zoom who are still with us, and we're only down to 3 at the moment, that there are tables in the back that no one has to be close to anybody. That's like my thing. So there's plenty of room here in this room.
I just want to know next month's book. I thought it was the girl with the blue star.
No, that's Summer, Jennifer Weiner.
What it says on.
That's Summer. That's Summer. Okay, let me check my list.
That's somewhere.
Oh,
A list came out initially that just had the books on it. The next list that came out has it by month. It's in the newsletter. As one who works really hard on the newsletter, it is a
Scroll down
killer.
and read your newsletter. Yeah, I have November, that's Summer. And I just want to thank Eileen for being open to trying this, to Mark for doing this because he loves to do it, and to Jeannie and Lori for a great discussion. Thank you.
Oh, before everybody leaves, I do have, sorry, I do have something to say about that Summer, and I think we do have to thank Bonnie for bringing it up. She had mentioned at the book club selection luncheon that some of us were at, some of us were not. The front cover art and the inside cover explanation isn't really what it's about. And some people who read the book criticized the book because they were expecting something very different. As Bonnie said, and as the prologue takes you right up to the point but doesn't take you there, it is about a 15-year-old who was raped and the repercussions years later. But Jennifer Weiner tries to keep it a little bit of a mystery of who was that 15-year-old girl in the current day and who were the other people involved. So that is really what the book is about. And when you read it, you'll get a lot more out of it when you read it that way, because you read the first half of the book and you say, what's going on here? So that will help explain. No, there is no spoiler alert.
Yes, there is. You just did.
It tells you that in the prologue. No, they should have read that in the prologue. It tells you as a 15-year-old.
Yes,
It should have been, because that's the whole thing.
If anybody's interested, the cards are here. It's 1 for $4, 7 for 25. I schlepped them in, so somebody buy a card. Also, we have a new life member, Shelley. I forget your last name, but we have a whole new life member. She filled out that form immediately and gave it back. That's pretty unusual. So thank you. Hope you'll come back to book club. Hope you'll come to meetings.
Can I say something from Zoom?
yes.
Hi, it's Arlene, and I wanted to thank everyone who made today possible. And the people that were home on Zoom, I'll speak for myself. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think being able to be a part of it, that there were quite a number of us that were on Zoom that participated, and we could feel as if we are actually a part of the group. So I thank Mark, Denise, Eileen, the 2 people who led the discussion today. I thought it was wonderful.
Yep, I agree.
I also wanted. Oh.
Yellow Star, Aunt Jenna is talking at 4KI Thursday evening at 7 o'clock. It is free. It's Zoom.
Thanks again.
Penn Janoff is going to be on Zoom Thursday night through Knesset Israel Library. It is free. You have to register, so they'll send you the link. Just go to the KI website and the library, or ask me now and I'll send it to you. I think I sent it to Eileen. And they really don't care how many people come. They would like to have anybody come from anywhere. Pam Jemoff does a good job speaking, even if you haven't read the book yet. We are going to be reading it, I think, with the group. So you are welcome to tune in from your home in the comfort of your home. 7 o'clock
I need to get
Thursday.
somebody over there. Pam Janoff is fantastic. We had her years ago before she got famous, which was very good for us. Okay, so Rona, you had something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Mark and everyone who did the technology. It worked so well for those of us at home. And I have to say that I really hope you do not exclude us from the discussion in the future. We are still not in a period of normalcy, and some of us, for health reasons, are choosing to still Zoom. And I'd like to know, because I'm not in the room, I'd like to know what the difficulty or what's the hardship of passing the mic around. I mean, what is your reasoning for wanting it to just be recorded? Not being in the room, I have no idea.
All right, I'm going to speak to that. I don't think it's a matter just of passing the mic around. I think that there's no way, and I'm honest, that I've done this without Mark being here, because it's kind of complicated. The whole setup is very complicated. God bless him. So I wasn't suggesting you were. I was just suggesting we were using up your time. So we will continue further conversations, and I'm glad you participated, and we did hear everything you said. So thank you.
I just think it was wonderful, Mark, that you did this. And I think it really enhanced the experience for people at home to be able to participate on Zoom. So thank you so much. And if it could continue, I think that would be wonderful. But I know that's relying on you. Thank you.
Well, this is, now you know why I have so many wires in our house. There's too many wires in our house.
Okay, does anybody have anything else? Because it's the only way they can hear. I'm sorry, what? Oh, I forgot. Anyone who is dying to give us a couple of dollars on their way out, I will find something to put it in. Thank you. You're welcome to stay and chat.
Okay, I think we're signing off.